The early morning sun painted the sky golden, but the beauty of the day didn't lighten Enoi's heart. She sat on the wooden bench outside their mud-brick house, staring at the empty pot by the fire. Inside the house, her mother coughed weakly, her voice echoing in the still air. Enoi's two younger brothers sat quietly in the corner, their small stomachs rumbling with hunger. "Enoi," her mother called, her voice raspy. "Come inside. Don't sit there worrying." Enoi stood and brushed the dust from her faded dress. She stepped into the house, where her mother lay on a thin mat. "Mama," Enoi said, kneeling beside her, "we can't keep living like this. Something has to change." Her mother reached out and touched Enoi's face. "I know, my child. That's why you must go to Anicha City. Your Aunt Ifeoma will help you find work. Maybe there you can find a better life for all of us." Enoi nodded. She hated the idea of leaving her family. But what choice did she have? Life in the village offered nothing but endless days of struggle. The thought of her brothers growing up hungry made her heart ache. Anicha City was nothing like Enoi had imagined. The streets were alive with noise, cars honking, traders shouting, children laughing. The smell of roasted plantains mixed with the pungent odor of open drains. Enoi clutched her small bag tightly as she navigated the bustling market on her way to her aunt's house. Aunt Ifeoma's home was small, but it was warm and welcoming. "Enoi!" her aunt exclaimed, embracing her. "Look at you! You've grown into such a fine young woman." For the first 2 weeks, Enoi roamed the streets of Anicha, looking for work. She visited shops, factories, and even small kiosks, but no one would hire her. The rejections chipped away at her confidence, and she often cried herself to sleep. Then one evening, Aunt Ifeoma returned from the market with exciting news. "Enoi," she said, her face glowing with hope, "I saw something on the hospital fence. They're looking for cleaners. You should go there first thing tomorrow." The next morning, Enoi dressed in her best clothes, a worn but clean blouse and skirt, and made her way to the hospital. The building loomed over her, its white walls gleaming in the sunlight. She hesitated at the gate, her heart pounding, but the thought of her family pushed her forward. The hospital manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Aid, interviewed Enoi. "Have you cleaned professionally before?" she asked, her sharp eyes scanning Enoi's face. "No, Ma," Enoi replied honestly, "but I'm hard-working, and I learn fast." Mrs. Aid considered her for a moment before nodding. "We'll give you a chance. Report here tomorrow at 7 a.m. Enoi beamed with gratitude. "Thank you, Ma. I won't let you down." The job wasn't glamorous. Enoi scrubbed floors, cleaned bathrooms, and emptied trash bins, but she took pride in her work, making sure every corner of the hospital sparkled. Over time, the nurses and doctors began to notice her dedication. "Thank you for keeping everything so clean," a nurse told her one day. "You're doing a great job." Enoi smiled shyly, her heart swelling with pride. She sent a small portion of her earnings back to her family, imagining her brothers eating full meals and her mother resting more comfortably. For the first time, it felt like life was improving. One afternoon, while sweeping the hospital entrance, Enoi heard the rumble of an engine. She looked up to see a sleek black SUV pull up to the curb. The windows were tinted, and the car exuded wealth. Enoi watched curiously as the back window rolled down, revealing a woman dressed in gold jewelry and a designer dress. "Do you work here?" the woman asked, her voice smooth and commanding. "Yes, Ma," Enoi replied, gripping her broom tightly. The woman smiled. "Perfect. I need your help with something discreet." Enoi hesitated. "What kind of help, Ma?" The woman's gaze darted around, ensuring no one was listening. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "I need used syringes with blood from the hospital. It's for medical research." Enoi's eyes widened. "But Ma, that's not allowed. You should speak to the doctors." The woman shook her head, her smile fading. "Doctors ask too many questions. I need someone I can trust." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick bundle of cash. "This is yours if you help me. There's more where that came from." Enoi stared at the money, her mind racing. It was more than she earned in a month. She thought about her family, their empty pot, her mother's worsening cough, her brother's torn clothes. This money could change everything. I'll try," she whispered, her voice trembling. The woman's smile returned. "Good girl. I'll come back next week, same time. Remember, the more you bring, the more you earn." As the SUV drove away, Enoi stood frozen, clutching her broom. She had made a choice, but deep inside, fear gnawed at her. The quiet village buzzed with activity during the day, but at night it fell into a serene silence, perfect for secrets. Yet Enoi's neighbor, Mama Nkichi, a sharp-eyed food vendor, noticed that Enoi's clinic lights stayed on unusually late. She'd also seen her leave the house at odd hours, clutching a bag. Mama Nkechi couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, after closing her food stall, Mama Nkechi decided to follow Enoi. She waited until the clock struck 11 p.m. and then positioned herself near the path leading to the river. Enoi appeared as usual, carrying her bag of blood samples. Mama Nkechi stayed a safe distance behind, her heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. The riverbank was shrouded in mist, and the air felt colder than usual. Mama Nkechi crouched behind a tree as Enoi stopped by the water's edge. Suddenly, a sleek, black SUV appeared out of nowhere, its tires crunching against the gravel. The woman stepped out, her presence as commanding as a queen's. "Good evening, my dear," the woman said, her voice silky smooth. Enoi handed over the bag of syringes, her face pale. "Here's everything from today." The woman inspected the samples with a satisfied smile. Then, to Mama Nkechi's shock, the woman removed her shoes and walked straight into the river. Her legs shimmered, and before long they transformed into a glittering fishtail. Mama Nkechi stifled a gasp, her hand trembling against the tree trunk. Mama Nkechi couldn't believe what she had seen. She waited until the SUV and Enoi had left before returning to her home. The images of the mermaid and the syringes haunted her. She thought about the villagers who trusted Nurse Joy. "Something terrible is happening," she murmured to herself. "I must do something." But Mama Nkechi knew she couldn't confront Enoi directly. Instead, she decided to gather evidence. Over the next few nights, she followed Enoi again, documenting her movements. She told no one, not even her husband, for fear of being called crazy. Meanwhile, strange things began happening in the village. Patients who visited Nurse Joy's clinic started falling gravely ill. Some couldn't walk. Others developed unexplainable fevers. Mama Nkechi started connecting the dots. Could the mysterious blood samples and the mermaid have something to do with it? One day, Mama Nkechi approached her husband, Papa Nkechi, who was a respected elder in the community. "Something is wrong with Nurse Joy," she said cautiously. "People are getting sicker after seeing her." "Nonsense," Papa Nkechi replied. "She's been a blessing to this village." But Mama Nkechi was determined. "I'll prove it," she said, her jaw set. Mama Nkechi waited until she had enough evidence. Footprints by the river, scraps of cloth from Enoi's bag, and a partially overheard conversation between Enoi and the mermaid. Then, during a village meeting, she stood up. "There's something you all need to know about Nurse Joy," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The villagers murmured in confusion. Enoi, who was sitting quietly at the back, stiffened. "Mama Nkechi, what are you saying?" she asked, her voice tinged with forced calm. "I've seen you, Enoi," Mama Nkechi said, pointing a finger at her. "I've seen you taking blood samples to the river, where a mermaid waits for you. She's the reason people are getting sicker." The villagers gasped. Enoi tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Mama Nkechi, you've gone mad." But Mama Nkechi was prepared. She pulled out a piece of Enoi's blood-stained cloth and described what she had seen at the river. "Is this true, Nurse Joy?" Papa Obinna, a respected elder, asked, his voice heavy with suspicion. Enoi's hands trembled. She glanced around the circle of villagers, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. She knew the truth was out, and there was no running from it. I only wanted to help my family," she stammered. "I didn't know it would hurt anyone." Her words only fueled the villagers' outrage. "You betrayed us," a young man shouted. "You put all our lives at risk," Enoi broke down, falling to her knees. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, "but it's not just me. There's a woman, a mermaid, who made me do this. She threatened to kill me and my family." The crowd fell silent, their anger momentarily replaced by fear. "A mermaid?" someone whispered. "This is witchcraft." The villagers decided they needed help. They sent word to a local herbalist known for his wisdom and connection to the spiritual world. The herbalist, Baba Ekene, arrived the next day, his presence commanding respect. "I've heard of such mermaids," he said, after Enoi explained everything. "They are powerful beings, but they can be defeated." "How?" Mama Nkechi asked. "The mermaid's power lies in the blood she collects," Baba Ekene explained. "We must stop her from receiving any more, and to truly break her hold, we must destroy the pact she has with Enoi." That night, Baba Ekene led the villagers to the riverbank. They carried torches, chanting prayers to ward off evil. Enoi, trembling with fear, followed at a distance. The river was eerily still. When they reached the water's edge, the mermaid appeared, her eyes gleaming with anger. "You dare defy me?" she hissed, her voice echoing unnaturally. The villagers stood firm, with Baba Ekene at the front. "Your reign of terror ends tonight," he declared, throwing a pouch of sacred herbs into the water. The river bubbled and churned, and the mermaid screamed in fury. "No, you cannot defeat me," she cried, but the villagers' chants grew louder. Enoi watched as the mermaid's form began to fade, her once glittering tail turning dull. With one final scream, she vanished beneath the water. The villagers returned to the village, exhausted but relieved. Baba Ekene assured them that the mermaid was gone for good. Enoi, however, knew she had to face the consequences of her actions. "I betrayed your trust," she said to the villagers, tears streaming down her face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do everything I can to make things right." Some villagers forgave her, others couldn't. But Enoi stayed true to her word. She dismantled the clinic and spent her days helping rebuild trust in proper health care, working alongside real nurses and doctors. Months turned into years, and though Enoi worked tirelessly to atone for her actions, the memories of her betrayal lingered in the minds of many villagers. Some refused to speak to her, while others cautiously allowed her into their lives. Enoi knew earning their trust again would be a slow process, but she was determined. She began volunteering at nearby clinics and hospitals, assisting real medical professionals. She learned to properly care for patients, and for the first time, she saw what true health care looked like. These experiences fueled her desire to become a real nurse, not just for redemption, but to honor the people she had wronged. Enoi also took it upon herself to educate the villagers. She organized health workshops in the marketplace, teaching simple practices like proper hygiene, basic first aid, and the importance of vaccinations. Slowly, the villagers began to see her in a new light, not as the deceitful Nurse Joy, but as someone who genuinely wanted to help. To fulfill her dream of becoming a certified nurse, Enoi moved to the city and enrolled in a nursing school. The journey wasn't easy. She struggled with the coursework, especially because she hadn't studied much since leaving secondary school. But the thought of her family and the villagers she had wronged kept her going. Her aunt, who had been skeptical of her at first, became her biggest supporter. "You've made mistakes, Enoi," she said one evening. "But what matters is how you're trying to make things right. Keep going, my dear." Enoi worked part-time jobs to pay for her studies. She cleaned homes, worked in markets, and even helped at a local restaurant. Each day was a battle, but with every passing semester, she grew more confident in her abilities. After 4 years of hard work, Enoi graduated as a registered nurse. She returned to the village, her nursing certificate proudly in hand. But stepping back into the village wasn't easy. The memories of her deceitful past still lingered, and she knew not everyone would welcome her with open arms. Her first stop was the home of Mama Nkechi, the woman who had exposed her. Nervously, Enoi knocked on the door. When Mama Nkechi opened it, her expression was unreadable. "Nurse Joy," Mama Nkechi said, her tone cautious. "Just Enoi," she replied softly. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want to thank you for what you did. If you hadn't stopped me, I might never have realized the harm I was causing." Mama Nkechi studied her for a long moment before stepping aside. "Come in," she said. "Let's talk." Their conversation lasted hours. By the end, Mama Nkechi saw the genuine remorse in Enoi's heart and agreed to let her prove herself to the village once more. With Mama Nkechi's support, Enoi began working at the village's new health center, which had been built with government funding after the mermaid's defeat. At first, many villagers avoided her, but over time, her kindness and dedication won them over. One day, an elderly woman approached Enoi with tears in her eyes. "You saved my grandson," she said, clutching Enoi's hand. "I know I doubted you before, but now I see you've changed. Thank you." Moments like these reminded Enoi why she had fought so hard to turn her life around. She didn't just want to heal bodies, she wanted to heal hearts. Though the mermaid was long gone, the scars of her reign lingered in the village. Many families had lost loved ones, and the fear of supernatural forces still haunted some. Enoi worked closely with Baba Ekene to address these fears, blending modern medicine with cultural practices to reassure the villagers. "Fear grows in silence," Baba Ekene told her one day. "Speak openly about what happened. Teach the people to trust again." Enoi began sharing her story with the villagers, explaining how she had been deceived by greed and manipulation. Her honesty inspired others to speak out about their struggles, and slowly, the village began to heal. Years passed, and Enoi's reputation as a skilled and compassionate nurse spread beyond the village. She was invited to work at larger clinics and even hospitals in the city. But she chose to stay in the village. This was her home, and she wanted to give back to the community that had shaped her. One day, while walking through the marketplace, Enoi was approached by Papa Obina, one of her harshest critics. "You've done well, Enoi," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "I misjudged you. Forgive me." Enoi's eyes filled with tears. "There's nothing to forgive, Papa. Thank you, Enoi's journey became a beacon of hope for others in the village. Young girls, inspired by her determination, began dreaming of careers in medicine and other professions. Enoi mentored them, helping them navigate the challenges she had faced. Her clinic, now officially certified, became a model of care and compassion. People from neighboring villages traveled to see her, and her work caught the attention of NGOs, which provided funding for further development. But for Enoi, the greatest reward was the peace she felt within herself. She had faced her demons, owned her mistakes, and turned her life around. Her journey wasn't just about redemption. It was about proving that even the darkest paths could lead to the light. Years later, Enoi visited the riverbank where it had all begun. The water was calm, reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. She stood there, remembering the fear and pain of her past, but also the strength it had given her. As she turned to leave, she whispered, "Thank you for the lessons, and goodbye." Enoi walked away, her head held high, ready to embrace the future she had worked so hard to build. Enoi's transformation became a catalyst for the entire village. Where once there had been fear and suspicion, there was now a renewed sense of hope. The villagers, inspired by Enoi's perseverance, began to embrace change. They saw how education and unity could empower them to overcome the hardships they once believed were insurmountable. The small health center Enoi had started now boasted modern equipment, a few trained nurses, and a rotating doctor who visited twice a week. Enoi's work caught the attention of state officials, who praised her efforts during a health outreach event in the village. The governor himself awarded her a certificate of excellence for her contributions to rural health care. Enoi, humbled by the recognition, used the opportunity to advocate for more support for underserved communities. "Villages like mine need more than words," she said during the ceremony. "We need access to clean water, proper education, and affordable health care. I'm grateful for this honor, but let's do more for those who cannot speak for themselves." Her speech earned applause and brought more aid to her village, including a water purification project and a scholarship program for young girls interested in nursing and medicine. Despite her achievements, Enoi knew that her past would always be part of her story. One day, she received a letter from Anisha City. It was from Mrs. Aid, the hospital manager who had once given her the cleaning job that set everything in motion. The letter was short but heartfelt. "Dear Enoi, I heard about the incredible work you're doing in your village. I always knew you had potential, but I never imagined you'd achieve so much. I'd like to invite you to Enoi General Hospital as a guest speaker for our staff training event. Your story will inspire others to see that even the smallest roles in healthcare can make a difference. Warm regards, Mrs. Aid." Enoi's hands trembled as she read the letter. Returning to the hospital where her journey had begun felt like opening an old wound, but she knew she couldn't hide from her past forever. Enoi arrived at Enoi General Hospital on a bright Saturday morning. The familiar scent of disinfectant and the hum of busy corridors brought back a wave of memories, some good, others painful. As she walked through the hospital, she spotted Nurse Ada, who had always been suspicious of her. "Enoi?" Nurse Ada called, her eyes wide with surprise. "Is that really you?" "Yes, it's me," Enoi said, smiling nervously. Nurse Ada shook her head, a smile spreading across her face. "I've heard about your work. I'll admit, I didn't expect this. You've done well for yourself." Enoi's speech later that day was met with a standing ovation. She shared her story honestly, including the mistakes she had made and the lessons she had learned. "It's not about where you start," she said, "but about where you choose to go, and how you use your experiences to help others. Her words moved many in the audience, including young cleaners and interns who saw a reflection of their own struggles in her story. After the event, as Enoi walked to the parking lot, she saw someone standing by the hospital gate. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the woman from the black SUV. Time had not dulled her sharp features, and her presence was as commanding as ever. "Enoi," the woman said, her voice smooth as silk, "I've been watching you. You've changed." Enoi squared her shoulders. "I have, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." The woman smirked. "You've grown bold. But do you really think you can erase your past? I still hold power over you." "No," Enoi replied firmly. "You don't. The mermaid is gone, and your influence died with her. You have no control over me or my life." The woman's smirk faltered for a moment before she laughed coldly. "We'll see about that." Enoi stood her ground, watching as the woman disappeared into the shadows. Though shaken, she felt a surge of strength. She was no longer the frightened girl who had fallen for promises of quick wealth. She had reclaimed her life and her power. Back in the village, Enoi poured herself into her work with even greater passion. She started a mentoring program for young women, teaching them about the importance of integrity, education, and perseverance. Years later, when she retired, her name had become synonymous with hope and transformation. The health center was renamed Enoi's Legacy Clinic, a testament to her tireless efforts to bring change to the village. On her last day at the clinic, she stood in the doorway, watching the bustling activity inside. The young nurses she had trained moved with confidence, tending to patients with skill and care. For the first time in a long while, Enoi felt at peace. As she walked home, villagers stopped to greet her, their faces filled with gratitude. She smiled at them, knowing she had not just earned their trust, but had also helped build a brighter future. Enoi's story spread far beyond her village. NGOs and government agencies replicated her model of rural health care in other parts of the country. Her work inspired a generation of young people to pursue careers in medicine, nursing, and public health. Sitting on her porch one quiet evening, Enoi looked out at the village she had once betrayed, and later helped rebuild. She thought about the mistakes she had made and the redemption she had found. Her journey had been painful, but it had taught her an invaluable lesson. True wealth lies not in money, but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave behind. With a contented sigh, Enoi leaned back in her chair, watching the sun set over the village that had shaped her into the woman she had become. Years passed, and Enoi became a beloved elder in her village. Though she no longer worked at the clinic, she remained deeply involved in community life. She was often seen sitting under the large mango tree in the village square, surrounded by children eager to hear her stories. Her journey, once riddled with mistakes, had become a powerful tale of redemption and transformation. One day, as the village prepared for its annual festival, a group of young nurses and doctors from nearby towns visited Enoi. They had heard of her legacy and wanted to meet the woman who had inspired so many. "Madam Enoi," one of them said, "your story gave me the courage to pursue nursing. When I was struggling, I thought of how you overcame so much. You've changed more lives than you can imagine." Enoi's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "But remember, it's not about where you begin. It's about the choices you make and the lives you touch along the way." One evening, driven by an unexplainable urge, Enoi walked to the riverbank where her life had taken a dark turn all those years ago. The water was calm, its surface reflecting the colors of the setting sun. She stood there for a long time, memories flooding back. The place no longer felt cursed. Instead, It symbolized the crossroads of her life, the point where she had chosen to leave behind her greed and fear to walk the harder path of redemption. She knelt by the water, her hands cupped, to scoop up a handful. "Thank you for the lessons," she whispered, her voice steady. "I hope I've done enough to honor the lives I once put at risk." The river seemed to shimmer in response, as if acknowledging her words. As the years passed, Enoi's story became a part of the village's oral history. It was told not as a cautionary tale of greed, but as an example of how even the deepest mistakes could lead to profound growth. The young girls she had mentored went on to achieve great things. Some became doctors, others teachers, and a few even pursued leadership roles in the community. They often visited Enoi, sharing their successes and seeking her wisdom. Enoi's later years were filled with peace and contentment. She often sat on her porch, watching the children play in the streets and the villagers go about their lives. She found joy in the simple moments, sharing meals with neighbors, tending to her small garden, and reflecting on the life she had lived. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Enoi sat in her favorite chair, a smile on her face. She closed her eyes, her heart full of gratitude for the second chance she had been given. The next morning, the village woke to the news that Enoi had passed away in her sleep. The loss was deeply felt, but the legacy she left behind ensured that her spirit lived on. At Enoi's burial, the entire village gathered to honor her life. Children sang songs about hope and redemption, while elders shared stories of her courage and kindness. Her grave was marked with a simple inscription: Enoi Okafor, a life redeemed, a legacy of hope. Years later, her story continued to inspire people far beyond her village. Schools, clinics, and community programs across the region adopted her name, using her journey as a symbol of resilience and transformation. The river where she had once met the mermaid became a sacred place, not for its dark past, but for the triumph that had followed. Villagers would visit, not out of fear, but as a reminder that even the darkest waters could lead to light. And so, Enoi's story became more than a tale of mistakes and redemption. It became a testament to the power of change, the importance of community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.